Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we've got something very interesting. We have ourselves a Pyroraptor, and it's a Pyroraptor that's obviously very Jurassic World Dominion based, but it's actually not an officially released or officially licensed product of the Jurassic World line. This is, I believe, an Oenux figure, so it's a figure found on AliExpress and sometimes on eBay and stuff like that. It's a random figure made from China, and I don't know who the sculptor is. You never find that kind of information out when it comes to these Oenux figures. But what you can see is, again, it's obviously very Jurassic World Dominion-ish as far as the style and the sculpt and the paint job and everything. And it's actually really cool. Like, it honestly looks awesome here in hand. It's not exactly what I would say is your most screen accurate version of the Pyroraptor, especially in the head area. I feel like the head sculpt is quite a bit different from what you see on the Dominion version, but the sculpt otherwise, kind of resembles and recreates the Pyroraptor pretty nicely, and it actually has some very, very nice looking detail for what it is, and is also quite sizable. You can see here again with me holding it, it definitely has some pretty impressive size. We also have an articulated jaw for the Pyroraptor, and they did something that not everyone captures, and that's actually give it some really nice plumage out here on the arms. So definitely looks really cool, but the only way to really tell how cool, I guess, is with a closer look, so let's do that right now. So starting up here at the head sculpt of the Pyroraptor, you can again see what I'm talking about when I say it doesn't look all that screen accurate. It looks okay, it just doesn't resemble the Pyroraptor perfectly. It does have some nice looking skin texture though, and some pretty nice looking paintwork as we have this nice light gray. As we lead up, you can see it darken to a very dark not even a gray, it actually transitions to a black, which looks pretty good. And there's also a wash that you can see is included in there to really highlight all of the detail. It almost has kind of like a snarling type of a look here. You can kind of see like the jawline lifting up right there, giving it that kind of snarling type of a look. The eye is also painted really nicely, and that's not something you always see when it comes to these Oenux type figures, so that's pretty impressive. Again, we have an articulated jaw, which actually does work pretty nicely. The teeth, although not sculpted perfectly, are actually painted pretty nicely on the outside. Of course, the inside, you can see, well, maybe you could see, it depends on the lighting. You can see they didn't really paint them on the inside of the mouth at all, so that is a bit of a downside. But on the outer side, they don't look terrible. A little sloppy, but not too bad. You can also see the tongue is sculpted in there. Of course, that is sloppy, though. You can see that the tongue is basically a red, and they didn't paint it out very carefully. They just kind of threw paint on it. It does have a glossy look to it, though. The rest of the inside of the mouth has kind of like a purplish tone. The detailing isn't too great in there, kind of generic, but it looks okay, I guess. If we close the mouth, you can also see some sort of detailing here for the underside, but they didn't really give it too much effort on the underside as far as the skin texture goes, even leading down here into the throat. It looks okay, but not really that great. I'm not sure what they were trying to create right here in the throat. Like, obviously here you can see it's feathers, but down here it kind of looks like it's meant to be feathers, and because you can see the skin texture picking up right here, but they don't really look like feathers to me. It just kind of looks a little bit weird. But you can obviously see here we have like sort of ridges here running along the snout of the Pyroraptor. You can also see the nostrils sculpted out right there. I'm not sure if those are meant to be ridges or even like an attempt at feathering, because as you lead back, you start to see feathers picking up here on the back of the head, and that's obviously very similar in design to what we see right there. You can also see again that the eye is painted very nicely over here, just like we saw on the initial side, and also sports a nice gloss coat. But as you lead back, you again start to see the feathers picking up, and the feathers actually look really good up here on the top of the head as far as the fine detail goes. Like, you can actually see the feather detail itself looks really good. And same style of feathering that we see here on the Pyroraptor right here, with the feathers kind of being a little bit bigger and kind of leading up on the back of the head like we see on the Dominion version. I also love that we've been given this nice reddish coloration, again very similar to the Pyroraptor, but you can also see that there's like a dark wash included as well, so it highlights the feathers, I think, quite realistically. And the red that they used is kind of like a glossy red, so the figure really, really stands out in an impressive way. As you continue to move along, you can see that the feathers, again, all have that same style and look to them as far as being kind of like erratic and all over the place, which I think also is quite reminiscent to the way that the Pyroraptor looked in Dominion. As you move down here into the arms, you can see the arms are held out in a pretty nice natural position, I think. And you can also see that the plumage throughout the arms is super impressive. Like, look at how nicely sculpted all of the feathers are, and also the really nice tones of color. Again, it looks like they have lighter and darker shades kind of the reddish tones. They've dry brushed it over, and then you also lead down to some bluish tones as you lead out toward the tips of the feathers, and it really is quite impressive, honestly. It looks really good on the figure as well. You can see that there is some nice paintwork here to the insides of the feathers as well, as far as like dark grays and some reds, but it's hard to get in there. The arms are not articulated or anything, so it's a little hard to really get up in that area and see it. You can also see the skin texture of the underside looks pretty good, and we have some nice variations of grays and everything down here on the underside of the stomach and chest of the Pyroraptor. As you move back here, you again see more feathers leading along the course of the body, again all very erratic, no specific design. As you can see, they're kind of just hanging out pretty much all over the place. As you lead down into the thigh, though, you can see that we return to a skin texture type look. You have some muscle definition even down here into the calf. And as you lead down into the foot, you can see how the foot's kind of leaving the ground. The nails are not my favorite thing in the world because the nails look a little bit bad to me. Definitely like the sickle claw's way too small, and this nail's huge, this nail's small, so they don't look too great as far as that goes. We do have dew claws, but they're unpainted, unfortunately. But as you lead back up, you lead out into the tail. You can again see as we have the red running along the center, the blue running here along the side, and lots of incredible detailing as you move out the length of the feathers. Like, the feathers are really, really well done when it comes to the sculpt, and as you lead out, you have this last little area here of plumage out on the tip of the tail, which looks really, really good, actually. And again, you can see more of the skin texture here on the underside of the tail. They've also applied a nice kind of dry brushing to that area with some bluish tones. And you pretty much see that same look for the entire underside with those bluish dry brushing again to the underside of the skin. And you can also see some more of the red here on the underside of the tail. The only huge difference between the initial side and this side compared to what we had just seen is, of course, you can see the head straight forward, the Pyroraptor's running. You can see that the arms are held in pretty much the same position. All of the sculpting and paintwork and everything looks pretty much the same over here as what we had just seen on the initial side. But you can see that this leg is obviously forward as the Pyroraptor is running along. I think the sculpting of the nails might look a little bit better over here. And they're painted with kind of like a nice creamy color, like an off-white or a light tan, also given a gloss coat. But unfortunately, again, the dew claw is missed over there as far as the paintwork, but it still doesn't look great, just better than what we saw on the initial side. But that's really the only difference, honestly, as far as what you can see over here compared to the initial side. You can see, though, that the feathers continue to, again, look very erratic, like they're not the same as what we had seen on the initial side. So they really did put forth quite a bit of effort in sculpting this one out. Probably one of the better Oenux figures that I've seen. The only thing they really needed to improve would have been, I think, the head sculpt to make it look a little bit more screen accurate, and that would have been like their closest attempt yet to recreating a figure that looks like the, film version of the dinosaur they were trying to create. But definitely a neat Pyroraptor. It's not exactly screen accurate, but probably one of the coolest looking ones that I've seen. The figure also balances pretty well, but it can fall over. Like, it'll stand nicely, but if you push it a little bit, see, it doesn't stay. I mean, that can be said for most dinosaur figures, but at the same, side of things, you can see that it does still stand pretty nicely. And like I said earlier, it does have a pretty impressive size, so for a measurement, you're looking at about 10 inches, almost on the dot, or around 25.5 centimeters in length. And then for a height, to the top of the snout, you're looking at just shy of 4 inches or 10 centimeters, and then pretty much the same thing, I think, for the feathers there on the back of the head. They look like they're roughly in the same area. For a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, and Robert Muldoon from the Mattel Jurassic World toy line next to our Pyroraptor, and you can definitely see that, again, it sports a pretty good size. Definitely, I would say a medium approaching large sized figure, because even though the length of the body and stuff isn't really all that long, like, the figure is just kind of like bulky as far as the feathering and stuff goes. So very impressive as far as the size, I think. But for another comparison, there is what I would say is probably the best, most screen accurate Pyroraptor out currently, with the Toy Monster International Captive supersized Pyroraptor next to this Oenux version. And although you can really clearly see the differences in the sculpt and obviously how much more screen accurate the Toy Monster version is, you can still see that they do both look really quite cool together. Then we've got the Mattel 12-inch basic version of the Pyroraptor next to our Oenux version, and you can obviously tell the basic version of the Pyroraptor is a bit larger. But for another comparison, there is the Mattel Extreme Damage version of the Pyroraptor next to our Oenux version, and again, you can definitely see that the Mattel version is more screen accurate in the head sculpt. It definitely looks a lot closer to what the Pyroraptor looks like in the film. The Oenux version did get the plumage in the arms, though, which is definitely nice to see. And overall, I think the feathering is probably closer. Well, it's kind of like a mixture. Like, some areas look better, like the head area of the Mattel version, I think, looks better than the Oenux version, but the, arms and the tail look better than the Mattel version on the Oenux version. So it's kind of a toss-up, but regardless, again, you can see that this is definitely inaccurate as far as the screen accuracy goes, but still pretty cool regardless. So this Oenux Pyroraptor is actually quite fun. Definitely another neat figure from them. And they've been producing some pretty fun figures lately, like their Giganotosaurus they released not long ago that also had a very Jurassic World Dominion-ish type of a look to it. And now they've gone ahead and given us a Pyroraptor, which again has that same style of Jurassic World Dominion type of sculpt to it. And I think it looks pretty neat and is probably one of my favorite Oenux figures that they've ever released. Like, the sculpt is really cool, has a ton of really nice detail, and the actual feather detail throughout is incredibly well done for the most part. Not everywhere, like the throat looks a little bit muted as far as the detailing goes, but once you lead back into the body, the actual fine detail of the feathers is quite impressive. The figure has kind of an exaggerated type of a look to it as a whole, so it looks a little bit crazy to me, but I do kind of like that. I like the exaggerated type of a look to it. The head sculpt, again, doesn't look exactly as the Pyroraptor looks in Dominion, and I think that's probably the worst area of the figure outside of the claws on the feet. But even with it not looking perfect, I still think it looks pretty cool. And the impressive thing about the head area is how nice the paintwork actually looks, because most times with these Oenux figures, you get pretty sloppy paintwork, but this time we actually have some pretty decent paintwork for the face, which is a huge plus. And that paintwork does run the course of the entire body as far as actually looking pretty good. They've given it some really nice kind of glossy, reddish tones and bluish tones throughout the entire body, and also a dark wash throughout, which also helps to highlight the detail, I think, even more. And it really stands out. Like, it absolutely pops when you look at it in person. And again, the improvements on the paint of this figure definitely have impressed me and given me hope that maybe Oenux in the future will give us a little bit better paint apps on whatever they release, and maybe we'll have some more nice looking figures like this. Again, the biggest downsides to the figure, I think, are the fact that it's not exactly screen accurate, which isn't a huge deal. It still looks pretty cool, but the nails just look super weird on the feet. And of course they missed the paint on the dew claw, but the nails just looking very, very strange, like one nail being huge, the other being small, the sickle claw being small. Like, it just looks weird on the figure. But again, outside of that and the sloppy paint on the tongue, it's still a pretty cool figure, and definitely one that in my opinion is worth picking up. So if you are interested in doing that, I will include a link in the description to where I purchased mine on AliExpress. So make sure you check that link, go grab this very interesting Pyroraptor, and make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.